Another year, another iPhone, and I finally upgraded this year. I'm coming from the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which might be surprising for some of you because you might think someone that made a tech channel might be upgrading every single year, but I don't upgrade every single year because first of all, it's really expensive, and second of all, it's not worth it. There's barely an increase between the 2 years. But when I start getting money for this channel and hopefully sponsors, then you get to see a whole lot more products. Anyway, this is the iPhone 14 Pro Max and I've had it for just around 2 weeks. Why did I get it so late? I don't know, ask him. If you're still considering an iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max, or you already have one, this video is for you. Personally, I have a lot to say concerning this phone as well as iPhones in general, but I will split my ideas into multiple videos to avoid having one unnecessarily long video. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to go over is build quality. Now, it's not news that iPhones have excellent build quality. Doesn't matter if it's a Pro iPhone or a regular iPhone. Even the iPhone SE, which is considered to be the least of the iPhones, is still quite durable. And that is the same thing for this phone in terms of durability. Now note, I am coming from an iPhone 11 Pro Max, the last phone before Apple switched to the whole boxy design. This made the phone feel even more different. I will say this, I like the boxy design because it is different and almost refreshing. But this thing is a bit too sharp. I'm not even joking. You could slit someone's throat with this thing if you apply the right force and use the right speed. Okay, quick disclaimer to exonerate myself from all of you sensitive teddy bears in the audience. No, I am not promoting any form of violence. Please leave me alone. The sharp sides on the iPhone make it uncomfortable to hold caseless for long periods of time. But for some of you, that might not mean anything because you're constantly having a case on your phone. But for me, I like to take my phone out of its case when I'm in bed or on the table, working on the table, where I know I won't drop the phone. I like the feel of the phone without the case, especially the matte finish in the back of the phone. So now let's move on to battery life. This is a Pro Max iPhone, so it's supposed to have the best battery life among all the iPhones released this year. But that's not the case this year. The iPhone 14 Pro Max doesn't have the biggest battery or best battery life out of all the iPhones released this year. That title goes to the cash grab of a phone called the iPhone 14 Plus. Numbers are one thing, but what is the real life experience like? My battery experience on this iPhone was great. I've had my old iPhone for 3 years, and over time the battery just got worse and worse like all iPhone batteries do. So I have not been used to the best battery life on an iPhone, and this honestly blew me away. I just could not kill this phone, and I do consider myself somewhat of a heavy user, and this lasted even with the always on display turned on, but it lasted even longer, a lot longer with the always on display turned off. I would start properly using my phone around 7, and by 11 p.m. I would usually have 23 to 25% battery left. But when thinking about charging, the iPhone is really behind. The iPhone 14 Pro Max has only 27 to 30 watts of fast charging. I don't think in this day and age you can even call that fast charging with phones that have up to 120 watts of charging. So 27 to 30 watts is a bit low, just saying. Now for MagSafe. You might be wondering why I'm talking about MagSafe in particular, but let me remind you again that this is the first iPhone I've had with MagSafe. So I need to talk about my experience for a little bit. Sometimes I get MagSafe and it can be really convenient sometimes, but sometimes I wonder why MagSafe exists. Just let me explain. MagSafe can be really convenient. I mean, I have a MagSafe wallet at the back of my phone where I keep my cards, but the magnets aren't as strong on the iPhone. I know having a MagSafe case just helps strengthen that connection if the magnets on the case are stronger than the one on the phone, but it shouldn't feel like it's gonna fall off if this is meant to have stuff like battery packs and wallets attached to the back. And the charging is really slow because you have phones that can do up to 50 watts of wireless charging. I know that's a lot, I'm not asking for that, but at least maybe 20 watts because it goes really slow. The screen is good, you should already know this. iPhones have really good screens. The screen is slightly taller than my 11 Pro Max at 6.7 inches compared to the 6.5 inches, but 0.2 inches doesn't mean a lot, no one cares. But the one thing I didn't experience on my 11 Pro Max was the 120Hz Pro Motion display. I did notice the difference. The 11 Pro probably has one of the smoothest 60Hz displays you will ever see. The jump from 60 to 120 was noticeable and I appreciated it. And by the way, I have experienced 120Hz before with my Z Flip 4 and the S22 Ultra and the S20 Ultra. So yeah, 120Hz is not something that's new to me, but it's really appreciated on the iPhone. Now for the dynamic island, which is the only way from a glance to tell the difference between the old iPhone and the new iPhone, unless you have the new color. There was a lot of hype concerning the dynamic island. First of all, that is a very horrible name. Even the touch bar would have been acceptable, but Dynamic island. What were you thinking? Anyway, the dynamic river is pretty cool. It's not revolutionary. If you don't have the dynamic river, you will still survive. But personally, I think it is pretty cool. The way it shape shifts and interacts with native apps like screen recording, clock, specifically the timer, phone calls, and purchasing apps using Face ID. Unfortunately, very few apps actually support dynamic swimming pool, which is a shame because it would have been so nice to see all these apps interact with each other using the dynamic fish pond. But I guess we have to wait for developers to catch up. But God knows how that's going to look with all the glitches people are reporting lately. But there is one more problem I have with the dynamic puddle. When light hits it, you will see that it isn't just one pill. It is a smaller pill and a hole punch for the camera, and that can be very, very distracting, especially when you're in direct sunlight. Oh, and if you're one of those companies who make screen protectors with the cutouts for the smaller pill and the hole punch, please stop this lunacy. I know some of them thought Apple wasn't going to kill the pixels between the pill and the hole punch, forming a big pill, but either way, this is not the way to do it. Please do not do this. Now for the camera, and this is one aspect I actually hated at first when I first got this phone, and it was because of the image processing. When you look through the camera app before you take a picture, it looks really, really good, but after you take the picture, the image processor decides to process the image, and most of the time it gets it worse, it gets it wrong, especially on the front-facing camera, which is the worst, because it just seems to like want to darken everything that it takes through the selfie camera, which is really, really unappealing most of the time. I did update the software and it did get a bit better, but it's still worse on the selfie camera, but the back camera is all right now. It's pretty good now. I don't know this whole new image processor they put into this phone, but I just don't like it at all, especially on the selfie camera, but I don't have any complaints about the camera in the back. There are 3 cameras in the back: the 48 megapixel main sensor, the 12 megapixel 3x telephoto, and the 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. Of course, the main highlight here is the 48 megapixel main sensor because we're all used to the regular 12 megapixel photos for the iPhone. Just note, when you take a picture, it will be brought down to 12 megapixels through pixel binning. You will have to turn on RAW, which will shoot in 48 megapixels, but the files are unusually massive, like from 50 to 74 megabytes per photo. So just turn RAW off when you don't need it most of the time. Video isn't really a topic to dwell on, especially when referring to an iPhone, because iPhones usually have the best video in any phone. And this is literally the best phone for video. Even when there's low light, the footage still looks really, really good. And that's one area I noticed a huge improvement from compared to my 11 Pro Max. My old iPhone would perform significantly worse once it got darker in video. But this one, it doesn't look as good as when it's totally bright, but still, it still performs really, really well. And that is why everything else on this channel is gonna be shot on this Sorry S22. After using the iPhone 14 Pro Max for around 2 weeks, I think it is a great phone. I'm happy it didn't get more expensive like the rumor suggested. But in honesty, it's not worth you spending another $1,100 at least if you got the 13 Pro Max last year. Unless you're one of those people who just want to have the latest and greatest, and there's nothing wrong with that, it's still fine. But just know it's not worth the upgrade. The only people I might see upgrading from the 13 Pro Max to the 14 Pro Max are those who just want to have the new one, or those who use their phone as their primary content creation tool, or those who have had an iPhone 11 or older. That's all from me. See you in the next one.